Today is 2:02. Today is January 9th, and the time is 2:02 p.m. I do call to order the meeting of the Administration and Governmental Affairs Committee meeting. I want to thank everyone for your attendance this afternoon. First order of business, we do not have approval of any minutes. I don't know if everyone realizes, but this is actually a new committee that has been combined between Administration and Government Affairs. And I just want to take a few minutes and I welcome our committee members, Dr. O'Quinn and Councilor Woods. And I thank you, Dr. O'Quinn, for this opportunity to serve as the chair of this committee. The Government Affairs and Administration Committee advises on matters regarding the City Council's personnel and city service employees, intergovernmental relations with city administration, including county, state, and federal authorities, executive orders, council interoffice budget, council office operations and management, as well as employee policies and Jefferson County personnel. One of the task or the many tasks of this particular committee is to develop and maintain an active list of city legislative priorities, which you will see as part of our agenda today, and to ascertain some top consensus priorities of the council and mayor for state legislative action and lead development of a City of Birmingham state legislative agenda to be approved by the council in the fourth quarter of each calendar year, facilitate recurring legislative updates from lobbyists, develop and maintain relationships with county, state, and federal authorities, as well as to advise on the efficiency and effectiveness of the council office and make recommendations for improvement. So I think I joined both my colleagues in the excitement of being able to work on this particular committee. We do have old and new business today, and we do have two agenda items that I'd like to present to you. First, we have a presentation by David Russell, Jr., who is the Executive Director of the Birmingham Jefferson County Port Authority Update. And before I say that, we do not have approval of any minutes since this is our inaugural meeting. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Russell, and Happy New Year. And do you have the red button pushed there in front of you with your mic? Is that on? No, turn red. There you go.
It's red now? Yeah, okay. Good afternoon, David Russell Jr., Birmingham Jefferson County Port Authority Executive Director. We just want to kind of update the council, the committee about our legislative agenda for fiscal year 2024. We're approaching the state in the general fund budget for about $20 million over a 4-year period for all inland ports across the state. In 2019, Governor Ivey allocated $5 million for inland port infrastructure and improvements through the DECA piece, and about 6 ports throughout the region, throughout the state applied for it. Well, maybe 8 applied for it, 6 was awarded. And through this program, it was very successful. I provided a package where Dr. Kevin Adaravi, when we hired him, he did an economic impact study of that report. And that report pretty much showed that it was a huge return on investment. About $15 million was made available just through those $5 million allocation throughout the state. So we're asking if they could do another $5 million a year annually, and this time open it up to studies as well. A lot of the rural ports did not have projects ready. They did not have projects available, and they don't have the resource or support. We are a little bit privileged here in Birmingham, but the smaller ports like Sumter County, Greene County, Jackson, they need a little bit more money for studying so they can plan out. So we're asking Governor Ivey. We actually met with her office Friday. We was in company with Chip Brown. Chip Brown's the chairman of the new Inland Waterway Intermodal Facility Committee that the state created about a year ago, and he's expecting this ask to come out of his committee. So we're just asking the city, the city to kind of help us if they see this come across their desk or see it come out of any committee just to support us on it.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we appreciate you bringing this legislative agenda to us and giving us this update. Councilors, are there any questions you have for Mr. Russell or any information you think would be helpful to us as they move forward with their agenda? Councilor Woods.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You don't got to go too deeply, but just an idea of, additional funding. What would y'all's kind of top priority be, if you had that additional infrastructure money?
So the warehouse that we're building is still kind of bare basic. It's 4 walls, a pad. We'd love to kind of expand that facility and add overhead cranes. But the key thing that we really need is infrastructure, more land, purchasing land. So right now, we do have a 99-year lease with Watco, but so we own it technically, but us having more land to fully develop and really put a vision with what we can do at the port and really support it. So purchasing some land along the waterway would definitely be helpful, or land that's connected to a rail spur. So the authority or the legislative ability of the Port Authority itself is not just the waterway, it's also the whole county. So we could find land connected to a rail spur that's connected to the port. We could still support the growth of the port throughout the region and throughout the county and not be on the waterway also.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Quinn? Yes.
So, just so I understand, is this included on our current draft legislative agenda?
No, well, go ahead, I'll let.
No, sir,
fine.
it's not. We just approached you all maybe 2 weeks ago.
Okay. So you're asking for us to consider including it on
Yes,
our
sir.
legislative agenda?
Yes, sir.
Okay, got it.
Anything else?
I don't think so. No?
Thank you. Well, again, we appreciate you in involving us in trying to help, seek ways that you can enhance the work that's currently being done there at the port and how to make this, the facility even more vital resource for us, not only for the city of Birmingham, but for an economic impact by these different projects that you're trying to do and as you build out. And give us again what you were saying, the warehouse and where those structures are with the capital improvements that you're trying to get out there.
Yes, ma'am. So expanding the warehouse will be the first one. Then the second will be adding overhead cranes to the existing warehouse to kind of just make it more efficient. So when product do come through, we can move it more efficiently and just increase the tonnage without having to add additional buildings out there.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah,
Dr.
so, again, I'm highly distractible and highly distracted. So just want to make sure that I understand. You're submitting an application to ADECA, right?
No, we approached the governor's office to allocate $20 million over the next 4 years, $5 million a year for inland ports throughout the state.
Okay,
But ADECA would administer that grant. They administered it last
right,
time.
okay, so yeah, I got it. So this is, I mean, what I was thinking is that if you were applying to ADECA for funds, this wouldn't necessarily be something that we could impact through our lobbying efforts,
We might come back when that time comes available.
Yeah, okay, but you're asking for the governor's office and the
Right.
state legislature to fund the program, basically.
Correct. Over
Yeah.
4 years.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate you again for bringing this to us today. As you'll see in a few minutes, we're going to be talking about just draft of agenda items that we would like to present. And so this is something, again, that we could take into consideration and just follow you as you go through with the request that you've made to the governor. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next item, councilors, we have on our agenda is presentation of the proposed 2024 legislative agenda, and Mr. Earl Hilliard Jr., who is the Senior Public Affairs Officer, he's going to lead us this afternoon, and I just sort of want to give an overview of what the expectations are for this afternoon. And one, we thank you, Mr. Hilliard, for presenting this and providing this priority list for us. And if you could just tell us, and I'm new to this particular Government Affairs Committee, so if you could just give us a rundown of how things typically flow, just for members of the public, and how we get to where we finally are when we go up in front of the legislative body.
Well, I appreciate that. Good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate that because we're on the same page with what I wanted to do today. Excuse my eye patch. This is life, doing this life stuff. But one of the things I want to start is first, let me just do a few basics. I know that everybody's knowledgeable and they know these things, but I want to go back. The first IF session this year will be February 6th. So that is when they go into session. there are 30 days. People always ask, when's the legislature start and when is it going to end? We have no idea when it'll end. By Constitution, they have 30 days for session. Tuesday and Thursday are their session days. Wednesday is the day that they go into committee meetings. So you say, well, why don't you just add those days up? You can tell. Well, toward the end of the session, they can do what's called burning days or adding days. So they can add a legislative session on that Wednesday. Sometimes they've been known to add them on Fridays. So just to let you know, last year, I think session started I think it was March 16th and March 12th, and it ended June 6th. So you can tell that's two, but there have been times where it's been 3 or 4 months. And I just want to say that. So that's kind of how the session goes. For your knowledge and for any public who's listening, if you ever want to follow the legislature, and there are different ways to do it, there are two websites that I like to use, that I personally use it to track bills and to see what's going on. Those two websites are Legiscan, which is LEGISCAN.com. And for that one, you put in Alabama, and you can put in the name of a sponsor, the name of the legislature, you can put the subject matter of a bill, or you can put the HB, House bill, or SB number in, and it'll give you all the information. It'll tell you where it is, whether it's in committee, who supported it, if it got voted down, and it'll tell you the different stages. And the second one, which is the largest one for Alabama, is called Allison. It is the state of Alabama's website, and it's allison.legislature.state.al.us. Now, the beauty of that one is that you can actually watch committee hearings. You can actually see everything live. You can see what's going on. It'll tell you the different advocacy days. It's one that for the state of Alabama, you can really go and see who your legislator is, who the senator is. When you want to know committees, you can look at it like that. And I suggest that. And for those who may be going, NLC, which is the Alabama League of Municipalities National, that is March 10th through 12th. With that being said, let me say that when it comes to the city of Birmingham's legislative agenda, everybody always goes, well, what's on your agenda? And we'll talk about that in a second. But the largest part of what we do in Montgomery, what our lobbying group does, what the people who advocate for us do, is we play defense. If you remember last year, we had some bills that could have really drastically affected affected Birmingham. The main one that could have hurt us, and there were two different bills, were the ones that will restrict or rescind occupational taxes. The reason why I say that is because a lot of times people go, well, if you're not passing bills, then you must not be doing much. But sometimes we can be hurt way more by what we stop or don't stop than we can by what we do. Last year, as you know, they had the Waterworks bill adjustment and Waterworks bill board adjustment, which there's someone who says if somebody else doesn't sponsor it, they're going to sponsor it, and they're going to bring that back up. The occupational tax bills, we know they're talking about bringing at least one or two of those back up. So those are things that aren't necessarily stated in our agenda, but they're there. For us, I'm not sure how familiar you are with SSUT, which is Simplified Seller's Usage Tax, which is the money from the internet that comes from people when they purchase online. That bill, there are bills to restructure how that would be, how the finance would be, which would be beneficial to us, because the way they do it right now is by count, but that doesn't necessarily, by members, but that doesn't necessarily represent how people spend money or how people do money or whatever. Just to let you know, on the defense side, there are absentee ballot bills this year. So if you've been following that, there's some that say that a senior citizen could, that is HB 12, it said the senior citizen could designate one person who could help them do absentee without them being criminally liable, because as you know now it is for people doing absentee ballot stuff. But there's also SB 1, which what SB 1 would do is prohibit a payment to anyone who assists absentee ballot in any way, shape, manner, or form. So that means you can't pay to collate, you can't pay anybody to do something, which means it basically means that you could not assist anybody in any way for absentee ballot. That means if somebody said, hey, I'm going to give you $10 of gas money to go take this down, that's literally a crime now if this bill were to pass. So those are the kind of things we have to watch. And the last one that I just want to really make notice, because these are things that will affect us because of our past behavior. HB 9 is a bill that will prohibit any face mask mandates in the future. So that's something, as you know, during the past pandemic, we adjusted. It would prohibit anyone from being able to do a face mask mandate. These are the kind of things that you go, well, how does that affect the city of Birmingham? It's obvious. And so we have to stay diligent on those kind of things. The largest bill that we assume this year, who knows is going to pass or not, it's the gambling legislation. I'm sure you've been following that. I tell people that every year the legislature has a pulse to it. It has a feeling, and their election years, their off election years, and that can kind of tell you if you're going to pass bills, if things are actually going to go through, what mood people are going to be in. This gambling legislation is going to be all over the place, and who knows how long it may, come like a phoenix and then go away, maybe around. But that actually affects legislation that we have, because sometimes at different times of session, everything's shut down and nobody's passing anything, which is one of the things that does happen. I think I've covered everything on that list that I want to talk about, and then we can go to the actual stuff for this year. One more thing, just to give you an idea of the breadth and scope. Last year, there were 883 bills that were proposed in the House. In the legislature. 524 were proposed in the House, 382 in the Senate, and I had the number and I lost it, but I believe there were 222 that were actually passed of those. So that number may be incorrect because I was looking at my notes. I think each of you were emailed a copy of where we have with this truncated agenda.
And if I could just ask a question, I just wanted to get a little bit of your thought before we move into the items. What do you think the climate is this year? Anything outstanding? Like you said, sometimes it relates to whether it's a year that they have elections or not, or like the length of the session. Anything that we might need to know as far as what do you think that climate might be for this session?
So this one's going to be interesting because, like I told you, the gambling legislation, but the major thing is the presidential election year. In presidential election years, it tends to inflame people's national politics. That national politics tends to go to local, which means wild bills come up with wild things. I'm not necessarily saying this face mask bill is wild. I think that it's an overreach, but there will be more bills like this. As you know, last year we had bills like the definition of a woman, where we actually had a committee hearing where people defined what a woman was. Those bills are coming back. We have trans bills, LGBTQ bills. We have other things. And because it's a presidential year, this is the year when people get inflamed. So those kind of things will happen. So we don't know until they're introduced. I checked right before I walked in the pre-filed bills just to see if any of those controversial bills were on there, and they weren't. For you and your colleagues, and I'll restate this later. One of the things I suggest, I've always talked to you guys about coming to the legislature. Let me know so I know you're there, so we can plan some stuff out. But I honestly suggest, for those of you who, some of you are well versed at it, some of you haven't, that you follow two bills. Just choose an easy bill to follow. Watch it get dropped, possibly come to the committee meeting, see how it works, and see how it passes both houses so you actually understand the process. And the second bill is I want you to follow something, if you would, homework maybe, follow a controversial bill. And then see the things that happen from the amendments that get placed in committee, how it gets killed, how it's supposed to be this day. I think a lot of times it will help you understand what your government relations teams are doing, what your lobbyists are doing, and what they do. Because so many times I'll have people call me and say, well, I thought it was supposed to be up to date at 10 o'clock. You had me come to Montgomery, and it's supposed to be at 10 o'clock. And at 9:45, they cancel the meeting or say it's pushed off. Just seeing the process and understand it will help a little bit more.
Thank you for that. Any questions on this segment before we move into the items? Are y'all good, counselors? You're very good. All right, thank you. Let's go into your next thing.
Okay, so the next section, these 8 bills that are on here. First, let me just take note of the last 2, which are 7 and 8. One of the things that we've started doing, just on a few things, not on much, but on a few things, we say legislation will advocate for at the state agency level. There's certain things that aren't about passing things. They're about maybe just advocating for. We use that. I'm not sure if you remember, and we were successful with the money for the Red Mountain, Turkey Creek, when they were trying to get money. I think that this year, possibly Railroad Park is going to try to do something where they can get some dedicated funding, but these aren't necessarily bills, and sometimes they're outside organizations or agencies that we just want to assist because in the bottom line, it helps the city of Birmingham, it helps city of Birmingham constituents. So these two bills on here are the Pardons and Parole Housing Fund and the low-income housing tax credit. I'm taking these out of order just because these aren't ones that we'll actually have legislation on, but we'll be supporting. To tell you about the Pardon and Parole Housing Fund, y'all know we had an issue last year and every year with they release formerly incarcerated people. And because of some bills that were passed a few years ago, last year, we had an incredible number of people that were dropped off in the city of Birmingham. That number were hundreds. So these are people who sometimes have been in jail 5, 10, 15, 20 years. There's no place for them to go, which means that, you know, if you talk to our housing, people who deal with homelessness and housing, you can see a precipitous increase in people at our whether it's heating stations or cooling stations right after we have these releases. And they say they don't do it in Jefferson County as much, but trust me, the numbers are because they don't have many place to go, and everybody knows we have services. So what this is doing, because we've had, obviously, we've talked to Cam Ward, he's tried to assist as much as we can and everything. So what he advocated for last year, I understand, is $500,000 in the budget that would help toward housing, especially individuals that came from this pot, because we taxed every housing unit we had that we help with and the groupings of people that they work with. So this would be that, and I hope yours says the corrected version. It says state budget as opposed to city budget because it would not come to us, but that would assist in that. Well, last year they put the line item in there, but it was not funded. So the reason why we have legislation we'll advocate for is we want to advocate for that to be funded. And then the second one is information on low-income housing tax credit. If I could have Kelvin Datcher come to the mic just really quickly. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Dr. Quinn.
Yeah, on the item number 7, with that $500,000, are you proposing that specifically for the city of Birmingham?
No, it would not be specifically the city of Birmingham because this is Cam Ward doing this for the state. But because proportionally we have more people coming here, it would be it would go to those organizations and those housing units, housing people that would provide for them. So it would not come to the city of Birmingham directly, but it would.
We would have some proportion of that. I mean, what I'm thinking is my reaction to that number is 500,000 would be an appropriate number for the city of Birmingham.
Right.
So perhaps Cam Ward could think of a bigger number for the state.
Well, and we will have conversations about that. I think that sometimes we have to get it started. Sometimes we have to get the party started and then allow it to
Understood.
to prove. And Kelvin Datcher is going to speak just to why we're supporting low-income housing tax credit. He can explain that.
Kelvin Datcher, several roles. Real quick on that Cam Ward piece, he's met with us several times, and it is just to get it started. And he does recognize the inordinate burden that Birmingham County carries with reentry. So he is, he's very clear-eyed about the challenges that we face. So, I mean, he just wants to kick it off. He is actually very forward-thinking when it comes to reentry. So I think this is a good opportunity for a pilot to prove the efficacy of this kind of an effort.
Yeah, you could tell him that he could impose a fee on our surrounding municipalities so that the homeless folks that they send to us could, benefit from the services that we provide here.
I think it's a great legislative proposal at the municipal level. So, certainly. But in terms of low-income housing tax credit, we struggle when we're competing against some of our surrounding states in having that state-dedicated low-income housing tax credit that can serve as a gap filler for a capital stack when it comes to competing to attract low-income housing developers. And so it's something that would be, statewide, of course, but of course we know our gap and we know our need here, and so we really need this so we can leverage the general fund dollars that you guys have generously allocated for us, as well as our community development block grant, home dollars, and those kinds of things.
Thank you.
Okay, and the first two bills, I'm going to have Caroline Douglas speak briefly and James Stanley speak briefly on these. But let me just say this, these first two bills were actually on our agenda. Well, that's the first one on our agenda last year, the Alabama Land Bank Act. It did not pass last year because, she'll explain a little bit more, but let me just say the overall is because the revenue wanted to find out how this would affect other funding sources, other interested parties who don't want us necessarily to be able to do this when they were opposed to us, and so we had to work a few alterations to the bill. Attorney Douglas and James Stamley, you might as well come up for two. Either for the first two.
Thank
Caroline
you.
Douglas will speak to the first one.
All right, thank you.
Good afternoon,
Good
councilors.
afternoon.
I'm Caroline Douglas, and I serve as the Executive Director for the Birmingham Land Bank. The state of Alabama has 3 functioning land banks. The statute authorizes a state land bank, and then you've got the Birmingham Land Bank, you have Gadsden's Land Bank, and Fairfield's Land Bank. So this legislation will not only benefit the Birmingham Land Bank, but all land banks in the state. Sponsored by Senator Linda Coleman Madison and Representative Neil Rafferty, there have been changes to this legislation that was initially enacted in 2009. Notable changes in 2021, which was the most recent amendment, were shortening the number of years that a property was required to be tax delinquent before the Birmingham Land Bank could acquire it. And that went from 5 years to 3 years. And also it reduced the number of properties that a municipality or a county needed to have in order to set up a local authority. So that went from more than 1,000 to more than 100 properties. So that opens up the gate and allows smaller municipalities to establish a local authority. What this legislation does, it does several things. It clarifies the powers of your local authority to be more consistent with other land banks in the country. There's about 250 land banks in the country. And so some of those powers that are common to them are issuing bonds, applying for loans from private lenders, but also applying for grants and receiving that funding. What this also does is it allows cities and municipalities to create a joint land bank authority. So this would allow, for example, the Birmingham Land Bank to partner with Jefferson County, because the properties we are limited to acquiring or even developing are within the city limits of Birmingham. And then this would allow the county and the city to work together and address distressed properties within the county's jurisdiction. This also gives the land bank the option to purchase tax delinquent properties at the county tax sale. Currently, our inventory, or where we would get tax delinquent properties, are from the state. This would allow us to participate in the county level at those tax sales, and that would help us to acquire properties that are more recently tax delinquent. What this also does is it authorizes the land bank to transfer property to either our local agencies or even our state agencies for purposes of floodplain management or stormwater. And it also authorizes the temporary of local land bank in areas where there isn't a local land bank, where the governor would issue a declaration of emergency if they needed to do that. What this also does, is pretty new, is it would authorize a local county or municipality that creates a land bank to allocate a portion of the local tax revenue to that land bank for properties that it sells to a new owner. That would be no more than 5 years, but it gives you the ability to do that and to further subsidize the operations of your local land bank. Now, the total legislation is about 40 pages, and we can definitely do in a separate session a more detailed dive into what this fully does, but at a high level, that is what this legislation offers.
Thank you. Any questions about this particular item, councilors? Yes, thank you. Yes, Dr. Quinn?
So you mentioned that currently the only avenue available to the land bank is to acquire new properties is through the state auctions. And you mentioned that some of the more recently tax delinquent properties are only available, I mean, you implied that they were only available at the county auctions. So explain to me that process. I mean, what's, after a certain amount of time at being offered for auction at the county level, do they then go on to the state auction? How does that work?
Okay, I'll explain to a degree, and I know I'll ask Attorney Stanley to join me in this explanation. Under the current legislation, the Land Bank Authority has to request from the Land Commissioner of the state certain tax delinquent properties that are at least 3 years or more tax delinquent. Under the current scheme of the county, they have the authority to choose whether they are going to sell the tax lien to recoup the delinquent property taxes or sell the property itself to recoup those delinquent taxes. What I understand is that Jefferson County has elected to sell the tax lien. What this really means is if this property goes tax delinquent, let's say you are the purchaser at that tax auction. You buy the tax lien at that auction for this tax year. You pay all the delinquent fees for the next tax year. If that property remains delinquent and the current owner does not pay the taxes for that next tax year, you as the tax lien purchaser have the first right of purchase to then purchase the delinquent taxes for that year as well. You can continue doing that for, I believe, a period of 10 years. You have the option within that time. I believe it is no less than 3 years, but no more than 10 years. So a 7-year span to quiet the title if you as a tax lien holder want to do that. But that just means that that property that is distressed remains distressed because you as the tax lien purchaser can continue paying those delinquent tax liens year after year after year after year before it ever gets to the state. So allowing the land bank to step into that sale would allow us to acquire the property and then through the programs that we currently have, allow it to be developed and then brought back to productive use. Did I do that pretty well? Okay.
Okay.
And right now legally, I do add, right now legally, the land bank cannot get those. So
Tax liens.
So unless this is passed, the land bank still can't get any of those.
Correct. We
Okay.
don't have access.
So tell me if this is accurate. So my simpler explanation is that the bill would add to our current capacity to acquire the property from the state through their auction, to add the capacity to acquire the tax liens through the county.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
got it.
Thank you. Any other questions, councilors? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to speak Jim Stanley from the Office of the City Attorney. I'm going to speak briefly about the non-occupied MRIN foreclosure bill we're working on. This will apply only to Birmingham. It is based on similar legislation that Mobile adopted a few years ago, and it's just now really starting to use to its full potential. In a nutshell, what the bill does is gives the city an efficient way to foreclose on our code enforcement liens in a way that results in clear title to the property, so it would make those properties marketable and attractive to purchase. Right now, there are 3 outcomes when we do code enforcement liens. One just for a general code enforcement lien where you board up a house or secure property. Under state law and under our city code, we're allowed to put a lien on the property for the value of of the cost of that work. There's nothing in state law, there's nothing authority we have anywhere to foreclose or do anything with those liens. They remain on the property, in effect as a nuisance lien in case somebody wants to come in and buy or refinance. They'll have to address us. It's not a priority lien, so we're further down the line. But other than that, we really can't do anything to enforce those liens. The second situation is with demolition assessments. We are allowed to assess a lien against the property. It's recorded in probate, and there is a process in state law for foreclosing on those liens. But because of the way the law is written, that foreclosure process does not result in clear title to the property. In fact, even though the law says if the city purchases at the foreclosure sale, which 99% of the time we do, they don't recognize us as having title to the property. They just consider that another step in the lien process. So those properties really wind up inevitably just with clouded title, with these liens on them, that there's not an effective way to foreclose and get clear title. Those properties typically turn into the third category, which were our weed assessments. Weed assessments right now are to be added to the tax bill. We have the authority to record a lien and probate and foreclose on it, but because of the volume, the city's not chosen to do that. The issue with that is there's a significant portion, probably upwards of 75% of the properties that are subject to weed assessments that are basically tax delinquent or otherwise have absentee owners or owners you can't identify. And right now, Jefferson County is not even accepting our assessments to add to the tax bill. So if there's a redemption or sale of the property, we don't recover. That's just a lost cost right now. What this legislation will do, will let the city come in, and for any lien we choose to assess on the property and record in probate, we can then come back and go to court in a judicial process and clear title to the property. So if you think of a property that's maybe had a demolition lien and then we've had several years of weed assessments and nothing's happening, we can intervene with this process and take that property and sell it, get clear title, put it in the hands of a responsible owner who will pay the taxes, who will maintain the property, hopefully will develop the property. It's similar to what the land bank can do, but it acts on code enforcement liens. It's important to note this does not impact owner-occupied property. And owner-occupied is defined fairly broadly. We're not trying to come in and dispossess people of properties that they're lawfully occupying. So those are completely off the table with this legislation. In the foreclosure sale, if it's purchased by a third party, the city will recover our costs for because the minimum bid will be an amount of our assessment with interest, and it'll make us whole. If the property is not purchased at the sale, then those are acquired by the city, which will give us an inventory of property that we can use to incentivize development in some of our more distressed neighborhoods.
Thank you. Councilors, any questions about this one? Dr. O'Quinn?
Yeah, so this would specifically authorize, in this case, the only Class 1 municipality in the state of Alabama to acquire the property. So I mean, the title refers to the land bank, but the land bank would not hold the property.
No, yeah, on the sheet you've got it's not really so much the land bank as the city that's occupied. The city and the land bank have opportunities to work together on this and on the land bank legislation to address these properties. But this is specific action the city will take to foreclose these liens.
Okay. Understand. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Woods. How are you?
No, I'm good on the bill itself, but I was trying to see why we're calling it why we have land bank in the title. Is that intentional or misprint?
That may be just
I think that's what's throwing up.
maybe with my iPad, actually.
Hey, man. Better days ahead, my brother.
We'll edit it out.
So it really shouldn't be there, probably.
Yeah, yeah. I'm look at that. Let me stare back at somebody. Okay. So this third one, this is the personnel board bill. We did not have this on our legislative agenda last year, but as you know, this was a hotbed issue that went through the legislature last year. What this bill would do is it would allow a municipality in the state of Alabama to withdraw from its local civil service system. Last year, it was held up for a lot of different reasons, a lot of talk, a lot of discussion. At the last part of the session, Trustville was able to pass their own specific one. There was a local bill, so Trustville was allowed to do this. But now this year, this would allow, it would give us, it doesn't say you have to, but it gives a municipality the option to withdraw from their civil service system. And that's what this bill would do. And there, obviously, I have the words exceptions included because right now they are drafting the legislation and they're working on certain things that have caused certain organizations consternation to make sure we have the right bill.
Thank you, councilors. Councilor Woods?
Yeah, I think you know I was gonna ask to read it, so, when do they think the draft will be ready?
So probably next week. There are a whole bunch of summers, as you might imagine, there are multiple cities that are involved in this bill. So because of that, they're trying to make sure that every city is addressed. As you might imagine, people have their own concerns. Some people's concerns are strictly with, we want to hire who we want to hire, and we can't do that. Some people are worried about the disciplinary issues. Obviously, police and fire are very concerned about that kind of protection still being there. So we're trying to make sure that we address all those different things for all of the cities involved. And I will tell you this, there will probably be multiple personnel board bills as there were last year.
Okay.
And in this case, of the next four, are all of these, we don't have a sponsor yet. Do we sort of have someone identified, or?
We have some people, let me tell you why these shift. These shift because obviously people are running for office in other places and people have different priorities with what they're focusing on right now. So as soon as you guys agree to this, we will get sponsors for them. And more than likely, we'll probably try to divide these up and make sure that one person has two of them and then one person has another one, because as you know, sometimes things happen. So that is why there are no sponsors on those. There's no sponsor on the personnel board bill because it's not finished yet, although we'll find obviously a major person to sponsor that. And then we have the next three that I'm going to have Kelvin Datcher come and speak on. And as he needs backup, James Stanley is here to back him up. And he
Perfect.
can quickly go through.
And as Mr. Datcher comes forward, let me ask this one about number 3.
Okay.
We've never presented this before. This is new. This is our
new
first
for
time
us.
putting it in the hopper.
This is new for us, but like I said, there were at least 3 bills last year in the legislature.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Datcher.
I don't know what y'all did to Mr. Stanley. Come on, Mr. Stanley, we need you here, brother. Kelvin Datcher, Deputy Director of Community Development. So last year the council, in its wisdom, allocated $10 million to seed an affordable housing trust fund. We did not move forward last year because there was a competing interest down there to put forth a bill that would create a dedicated source for the Alabama Housing Trust Fund. And because ours was locally sourced with our funds, we did not want there to be confused or conflated at all, because we didn't want ours, folks from around the state to think that we wanted state dollars for the Birmingham Affordable Trust Fund. So we just stayed back and let that play out. We were confident that it would not advance. It did not advance, of course. And so now we have the opportunity to present ours without it being tarnished by the considerations for another bill that we didn't think would move. So we're incredibly excited about that. Of course, the goal is to create that fund that we would, one, deploy locally generated tax dollars, but as importantly, philanthropic dollars of the grants that we could pursue could all be leveraged to move forward on our affordable housing work across the city. So, Jim, you want to talk about the other two? And a couple things that Jim talked about are absolutely essential for us. And we're looking at these as a kind of a community development package. When Jim talked about that demolition lien, you all have helped us streamline and really knock back that backlog of that demolition list. It used to take, 6 years to get it done. Artemis Willis has done a phenomenal job of getting that down, and the dollars you all have allocated have allowed us to tear down properties across the city. Now we have a chance to go after the title to those and put those back into the hands of responsible developers and make it a part of our own portfolio for development of affordable housing in our legacy communities. So, Jim, the other two?
Yeah, I'll speak in particular. Number 6 is essentially the same version of the bill as number 2. Number 5 is the Alabama Vacant Property Registration Bill. And this is really, it's another one that's geared towards Class 1 municipalities. A lot of cities across the country have vacant property registration ordinances. The vast majority of those have come about because they have home rule powers that allow for that. In several states, there is state legislation that authorizes municipalities to create a vacant property registration system, and that's what this bill will do. There are basically 2 models for the ordinances. One is based on the length of time of vacancy, and the other one was very prominent after the 2008 foreclosure crisis that required registration after foreclosures. This bill is tied more towards the length of the vacancy, since we've really moved beyond the immediate issues with foreclosure. And what it would do, it's broadly drafted to give the city pretty broad authority within certain parameters to enact an ordinance that requires registration of vacant residential and commercial buildings. And it contemplates that the city can appoint an administrator for the program. It can assess a registration fee annually. I think it starts off with a maximum of $250 a year for residential, $1,000 a year for commercial. That can increase over time, but it maxes out at 10 times whatever the initial fee is. You don't have to start with those numbers, but those are your maxes. Again, we have the flexibility to choose. There are some common sense exceptions. I'll say that if the property is being marketed for sale, if it's tied up in a estate or a divorce case, we're not going to act on those properties because the owners often don't have the ability to do that. The owners have the ability to come in, though, and secure the properties, and with that get some relief from the registration requirements. And then, again, at the end of the process, if they refuse to pay, the city is able to get a lien on the property, which can go into the foreclosure bill we talked about earlier. So there's a way to enforce that. But the idea is to create a disincentive for owners who have large numbers of vacant residential or commercial buildings to just leave them there and not attempt to do anything with them. By paying these fees, the hope is that they will be more incentivized to actually secure the property and then to maintain it and to redevelop it.
Thank you. Any questions about this one? You want to go ahead and do 6?
Yeah, one more thing, our CAN committee. We want to thank Caroline Douglas, Jim Stanley, Julie Bernard, particularly because they have really helped us look at this from a holistic perspective. And so if you see all these things are really overlapping and intertwining, and that gives us the authority to do the things we need to do en masse. This is particularly important because there have been, quite a run on properties being acquired by folks from outside of the city, outside of the state. So we have these absentee landlords that are not here. It's hard for us to get our hands on them. Hard for us to get in touch with them. So this gives us some authority to be forward-leaning and be very aggressive in going after properties in our communities so that they don't sit stagnant and vacant. We don't have to, ask you guys for money to cut lots and maintain lots. That we're really being aggressive in compiling them and then leveraging them and deploying them back into use.
Thank you.
So what Attorney Stanley was saying was that 6 and 2, 6 is encompassed in 2. All the extras that they put in 2 is 6, the code enforcement things you're talking about. So there's no reason to have a 6. We will actually remove that because it's all covered in 2 now.
Well, I do want to thank you for the strategy here that obviously we're creating, almost want to take some of Councilor Tate's terms, an ecosystem of legislation that will help us with our code enforcement issues. And so we have more opportunity now to clear these vacant properties. I'm very excited to see that. I know in some information that's been given us, a lot of our vacant properties are owned by people that aren't in the city of Birmingham. So they have no interest in the issues that we deal with the blight and what happens as a result of that. So I'm hoping definitely that number 5, that legislation was sort of, quiet that a little bit as far as how we have to deal with that. So I'm appreciative of what we see before us today, definitely from a code enforcement or trying to rid us of those nuisances. But I'm going to allow councilors, I know they may have some questions, but did you want to follow up on that before we started with
You can go ahead
questions?
now.
Okay, thank you. Dr. O'Quinn.
Yeah, so in reference to number 5, I can't remember exactly how I came about learning about this, but recently the Alabama Supreme Court made a decision concerning a case involving the city of Center Point, essentially trying to enforce international property maintenance standards for a multifamily residential property. And ultimately, if I'm remembering correctly, and I'm not an attorney, but anyway, if I'm remembering correctly, the Alabama Supreme Court essentially determined that the city of Centerpoint did not have the capacity to do that because it was essentially violating the Alabama Landlord-Tenant Act. So my question is, if what I just said is accurate, how does this legislation jive with that Alabama Supreme Court ruling?
Yeah, Councilor Quinn, the case you're mentioning with Centerpoint was premised on rental property registration, and Centerpoint had a program and ordinance to require registration in order to, just for rental properties. And in order to satisfy their requirements, the property did have to meet the International Property Maintenance Code. In Alabama's Landlord-Tenant Act, the Uniform Act, which is not considered among the strongest in the country, by the way, the state has preempted municipalities from adopting rental property requirements that aren't applicable to all properties across the board. And if you think about it in the rental context in Centerpoint, if they had required inspection for every residential property, then it might have passed muster, but that would be basically prohibitive to even try that. So because of the way the law is written, cities are still, and because of that ruling, cities are preempted in the rental property context from adding these additional requirements outside of just whatever normal code enforcement is.
So we're essentially avoiding that by creating this new vacant property designation or
Possibly, the rental property really is focused on occupied property. The idea is if you're renting property to tenants, we want the property to be safe and meet certain codes, and so you just can't rent anything for occupancy. The vacant property is intended to act on truly vacant property that's not occupied or not
vacant in the sense that the current tenants don't have a contract with the property owner to occupy the property.
It's not, yeah, that won't satisfy the requirements for vacancy. There is if we want to think about going forward, there's a solution to the rental property preemption, and I think they've done this in Tennessee and Nashville and Memphis, is just to exempt certain cities from that preemption.
Okay. Got it.
Is that it, Doctor? Counselor?
Yeah, and so on the rental piece, like I've been down that rabbit hole a couple of times trying to figure out like a ordinance that we could possibly take up, but I kept getting back to the same place, which was the mechanisms that are already in place, which is the basically the licensing. So if you are renting a property, you're supposed to have a business license, and so there's another mechanism that we could use to make sure people are that we know where the rental properties are and things like that. But I don't necessarily see a need for our starting point to go any deeper than the code enforcement, basically that applies to everybody across the city right now. So, but there is a mechanism to identify them in place, and probably a lot of revenue sitting out there too. So,
Yes, Dr. Glenn.
So in this case, I mean, I sort of made light of this a minute ago, but I mean, seriously, how would you guys define vacant in this bill?
Typically focuses on the length of time it's vacant, and again, makes exceptions if it's being actively marketed for sale, if it's tied up in some kind of probate or divorce proceedings, if there's been storm damage, some other things that you would, think of that might excuse vacancy. The idea is for something that's really a longer-term vacancy where it's just being pure speculation and the owner is not trying to maintain it, they're just holding it for the market to turn around and forcing the city to expend resources, to either secure or address the nuisances associated with it. That's what the vacancy target is. It's not really intended for something that's occupied or occupiable.
Okay.
Okay.
And would it apply to both commercial and resident, all properties? Yep.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hilliard. We appreciate you for bringing these items. Now, I know counselors, I'd like to talk about next steps and if there are any additional items that you wanted to have for consideration. Yes, Counselor Woods.
yeah, I would just ask to get a copy of all the bills once they're written, like if any of these are written, other than, or if there's been any changes to the first two. But just whatever version will be advertised, we can get that copy is.
Okay, and of these bills, if I'm correct, I think the only two that have to be advertised, if I'm correct, Jim, they've already been advertised.
Number 5 is not number 2
Okay, I got you, all right.
So we
number
can get a
5
copy.
But I can get you a copy of 1 and 2 now, and then as they come up, we'll get them a copy of them. And honestly, I'm gonna make sure that you have a copy of this, but that's one of the reasons why the other 2 websites I gave you, because any bill you hear about, you can click on and get that copy of the bill online.
That's
So-
tough.
So I just want you to, just to know that. Like, I'm gonna get you these, but I'm saying.
I
just so-
appreciate you, man.
Just so
I
you
appreciate
know
it.
that any bill from anybody you've heard about.
Okay.
And as I always tell people, please don't read the summary, read the actual bill. You can read the summary, but summaries don't always tell the real story.
No sneak peek.
And would you be able to, I'm not sure, did we get the minutes of those 2 websites? You have that, Isola, you'll be able to get that, because I had a little trouble writing them down, so just be sure that we can make that part of our minutes. Dr. O'Quinn?
Yeah, couple of things. So for the Housing Trust Fund legislation, I'm looking at the summary here. The City of Birmingham's Housing Trust Fund should be structured as closely to the State Housing Trust Fund as possible, but as Mr. Datcher mentioned, there is no State Housing Trust Fund. So
I'll let him go back and speak, but there he is.
I apologize for any confusion. Very similar to the state, the Transportation Trust Fund. There's a trust fund that exists. It just doesn't have a dedicated funding source to go to it. So it's just a shell that's just sitting there without any dedicated funding to it. Yes, sir.
politics. Okay, my follow-up question is that, the council has also taken a stab at developing a legislative agenda. And, you know, there's definitely the legislative agenda that we have before us today. Many of the same items that were on the council's legislative agenda are reflected on what we have before us today. But, I mean, there's a couple of things that I think are really important to the council that were omitted. And one of the things that I think that the administration, the mayor's office cares a lot about as well is the idea of getting authorization for automated traffic enforcement systems. So
We can have that back on there by next week. So in other words, if that is a priority, I was waiting to hear a few things back. I had a situation at the last meeting, so I did not get a copy of the council's specific thing. But if y'all notice, if you look back for the last 3 years, there's been a very cohesive agreement between the council and the mayor's office with our agenda items, and they've kind of rolled on to where we are now. So if the automatic traffic enforcement is a priority this year, some of the things, like I told you before, that we're gonna support that aren't on the agenda, some of it's just timing or whatever, but the automatic traffic enforcement absolutely can be on there. We thought that all of that information was covered in one of our exhibition driving bills, and we have had an issue trying to enforce it. Because if you look at the second exhibition driving bill that passed, we should have had the ability in that, but it seems to be some issue with that, which is why we didn't think we would need that one, but I can definitely put that one back on. The other thing too about the agenda is I want y'all to think about it as a living, breathing document, which means even during the session, sometimes we have to respond to somebody else's bill by creating our own bills. So we're about a month out now, maybe a little bit less than a month out. But as we have different priorities, priority shifts, sometimes we take things off, sometimes we add things, especially as we know they're going to meet with certain levels of resistance or people are now open to doing different things. So there's no issue with putting that back on there. And your second one?
well, something that I spoke with Camila about earlier. So during the 2023 legislative session, it's my understanding that the state legislature took action to change some of the criminal sentencing policies. And one of the things that, to my understanding, again, I'm not an attorney, but one of the things that took place that I think has had immediate impact in the city of Birmingham is that the state legislature changed the bond amount for which a person who's been booked into a jail can bond themselves out on. So it's been increased from whatever it was to now $15,000. And yeah, boots on the ground observation is that in this past year, we have had more incidents where, you know, individuals who are known to law enforcement and to the community that they are victimizing are being arrested, booked into a facility, and are back out on the street the same day. The mayor refers to this as catch and release. And it's something that's having, you know, from my personal viewpoint, it seems to be having a profound impact on our communities throughout the city. So I'm offering, you know, that as something that we would consider asking the state legislature to revisit.
To increase that amount or to lower the amount with that? I thought at first you were saying the amount was higher than you thought it should be.
Well,
but now
they
it sounds-
raised the yeah, you can probably speak to it more better than I can, but what it's resulted in is individuals who would otherwise have to remain in jail
I got you.
are
Right,
able to sign themselves out.
So we can absolutely do something to address that if it's just according to how you want to address it. I noticed that Representative Chris England has about 5 bills that he pre-filed, and 2 of them I think are in the same subject matter. If you go to the Allison website I mentioned, you just hit pre-filed bills, you can see those. I'll go back and look at them and read them just to make sure, because I just browsed over them. But if there's an issue here, then there's an issue other places. I'll look into that. But basically, when we see issues like that, we can work on how we can address that, because sometimes we can say, look, we can come up with our own bill that makes it more strict. But just remember, as you deal in that level now, there are real sides that are pro and con that. And so we need to make sure that we're on the right page with how we want to, what issue we're trying to address and how we want to address that.
Yeah, and I understand, the larger issue, but as I understand it, the state legislature was trying to address, the state correctional institutions overcrowding issue. And, what we're referring to is, city and county jails, which,
Yeah.
Don't fall into that same category of situation. So, again, I'm just a lowly city councilor trying to, advocate on behalf of an issue that's impacting our communities, and I'm probably not, probably don't have all my facts straight and don't know how to articulate it as well as some other folks do, but I'm just putting it out there as something that we would consider asking our state legislators to help us with.
Okay. That, and one of the reasons why both our group and the Jones group, what we do is we also monitor what the other cities are doing, because sometimes we see that they're addressing something that can be ours. Sometimes we have them increase it from their local bill to a statewide bill, and then we help them with it. And sometimes we just support their bills. So that's one of the reasons I'm glad now that you put that on my radar, I'll look and see if there's anybody who else, because trust me, if we're feeling it, there's another city that feels it, or maybe multiple cities. And I'll actually bring it up at the next Big Ten meeting, which is in a couple of weeks, and just see, and I'll ask them, is anybody else dealing with that? Because sometimes it's better when we come up with joint, because they may have a way to address that grievance already. But otherwise, I can just see if anybody else has something. And then if not, then that's when we have to create something to solve our issue.
Yeah. I mean, perhaps as we're asking, Cam Ward about $500,000 for the city of Birmingham to help with housing, you might have some thoughts about this as well, too.
I got you.
Anything else, Dr. Quinn?
I don't think so.
Thank you, Mr. Hilliard, for presenting this to us. This is very important to us, as we've already said. I do want to turn it over to our committee, and as Council President, I just want to ask you for guidance in next steps, because we know we've got the session coming up on February 6th, and we need to present this to full council for their consideration and get their feedback. So any thoughts from you, Dr. Quinn, on how you'd like to proceed with that?
Yeah, so you talked about this briefly. So there's basically 2 pathways that we can take. The committee can recommend this directly to the full council for consideration. Alternatively, if we feel like there's additional discussion needed in a committee of the whole meeting, we do have a committee of the whole meeting scheduled next Tuesday. However, that would delay. The 23rd would be the earliest that we could get this before the council for approval. So my question to Mr. Hilliard is, I mean, what are your thoughts on
So
timing?
let me tell you what the process is for us after we finish here. So let me just state this first, while adding the automated traffic enforcement back in, adding that back in, what we would have done is, if this were, let's say, going on council next week, we would send this to the entire Jefferson County delegation. Once we had this, we and the Jones Group would reach out to them individually, talk to them about it. So I'll set up some meetings, but we talk to them about it. And then we would schedule with you guys, the mayor and everybody, a meeting with them the second or third week once they're in session. As you know, back in September 25th, we tried to have a meeting, but we couldn't coordinate the schedules. With it being a month out, it's very difficult for them to meet because they're starting being called to Montgomery and other places, and they're 9, 10, 11 here, and then there we've got like 20 something. So we're basically just trying to make sure to coordinate it. So we just have one in Montgomery, which I'm not sure if you guys came before we did it like 4 years ago. It's pre-pandemic or whatever. We've always had them here since then. But revisiting that so we could do it in Montgomery where they are when they have to be in town anyway, and do it the first couple of 2 or 3 weeks of session and do it that way. So the longer we have, the easier to get in all the phone calls, make sure by February 6th that we've gotten in all the phone calls and discussing it. But it's obviously your pleasure.
The longer you have in terms of time ahead of the session starting
Yeah,
to
once
work,
it's approved, I would hate to send it out, say this is the agenda, and then we have a committee of the whole meeting and something change or whatever, and then I just want to make sure that what I say is the
right?
legislative agenda, and we can always add, but I'm just saying at that point.
Yeah, so what I'm asking is if this were to go for committee of the whole for discussion on Tuesday, the 16th,
Okay.
then that would put full council consideration of it on Tuesday, the 23rd. So in terms of what you're suggesting that we, do once the legislative agenda is adopted, is having full council approval on Tuesday, January 16th versus Tuesday, January 23rd.
Yeah.
Is that going to make a significant difference?
We'll see. I really don't know, but just because we've got to call people, because some people will be meetings, some people will just be phone conversations, and I've got to schedule it out with a number of people. But once again, we will deal with whatever you guys think is best for you.
I would just ask for you guys' feedback then.
My thought is, I would want to be sure that we give councilors an opportunity to, look at this and have discussion within the group, which certainly the COW gives that great opportunity. And so with that COW being on the 13th, then that would mean we would bring that item back to council on the
16th.
On the 16th.
Next week, 16th.
All right, I was looking at February, I'm sorry. So then the 16th, so then that means that we could bring that back on the 23rd.
Right.
Correct.
Be
And then that would
advised
give you
that
2 weeks.
we've got a
We'll make it work.
committee of the whole agenda that,
That's pretty packed.
well, we've got the whole right-size parking initiative on there. And so right now, the committee of the whole agenda looks like the right-size parking initiative, which will probably predominate the issue for the conversation. We'll have updates on 4 different redevelopment projects that the city's involved in, the Family Fun Center, the Masonic Temple, the amphitheater / Star project, and one other that I'm blanking on. But anyway, 4 different construction projects, and then there's something else. I was hoping to update the council on where we are with the citizens participation plan and related pending litigation. So all of that to say, we've got a relatively full agenda for committee of the whole already, but
Well, you know, when we think, yep. Definitely we have lunch, dinner, and supper scheduled for us for
we
that
can
day.
do all that.
But no, I understand where you're going. You know, this particular list does not deviate that much from what has already been circulated to counselors. So it's not as if the first time they would be looking at this for consideration. So given that, you know, perhaps if we could vote this out of committee today, or I just want to get your feelings on the climate of the council, that they would need that discussion where then we'd have to do that at another meeting.
No, I'm fine with that. I mean, we can have a long committee of the whole meeting, or we can have a longer committee of the whole meeting, or we can have a long council meeting. So pick your poison.
Correct. Councilor Woods?
Man, I'm just excited, man. I think this is
Excited.
probably the most thorough government affairs presentation that I've been able to witness. So I think we're going in a good direction. I think, too, like almost having more of a streamlined agenda. And so just really like making sure like whatever we put on there, that's where, you know, that's the things we really want to push. And so there's things on there that we don't want to, you know, we don't want to actively push. We want to make sure like when the legislatures get a copy of our agenda that they know like everything on here, run with it, you know, not, all right, number 3, don't worry about number 4, you know, so like, let's make sure everything that we really want to push. But I don't know, I mean, I've in the past had some conversations and just sending it out or maybe just asking people if they have anything they want to add or whatnot. So I think if you send it to full council with, in the meantime, soliciting, send an email out, maybe give central staff to ping other offices to see if there's anything on the list they want to add or take away or have some feedback. But I think we had, you know, most of these items are not new. And so pretty much everything has been around. So I'm pretty confident everybody is good with these. It may be a one-off or two somebody wants to throw into the bucket, but I think that's a lean, mean agenda. I mean, people are excited. I think we had like staff assigned each item, and I think we might be able to get something done. So I'm open to either option, but I do think everybody probably has enough information, but we could reach out and it could go to 2 committees if it needs to.
So I'd like to make a motion that we recommend the legislative agenda as drafted with the addition of the automated traffic enforcement item to the full council for approval.
Second. Any questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any objections?
Any objections? It's unanimous.
I was looking at it. If Earl wanted
Thank
to
you.
object it.
Thank you. You guys are always wonderful. I love being here. I love being able to present to this group. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Again, I do want to reiterate, I'm very grateful as being the most recent chair of this committee that we went through this particular process. And so I want to thank Mr. Hilliard and the mayor's team. Truly an opportunity to go through these items. And I believe it will help us to be more in sync when the council realizes what work has gone into this and our discussion. And then, I'm just looking at how these really reflect on some of the issues that we have talked about over the past year or so that we felt were very important to us as counselors and to our residents, that would help our citizens with some of the issues that they have to deal with as well. Any other items, I don't think we have any new business. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
I move adjournment.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you very much, everyone. Meeting is adjourned.